You are listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the Spike Rogue. Each week we design new decks for tournament play. We put our creations to the test and share our findings on the air. Coming up on the Brew session, Malcator Purity Overseer brings Blade Splicer into Pioneer with an extra twist. Can we triple up and make it rain golems? Then on the Flashback, testing results with Elesh, Norn, Mother of Machines. That's all coming up on Faithless Brewing. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Faithless Brewing podcast. I am David Robertson, joined as always by the man, the myth, the legend, the CEO of the Faithless Brewing podcast. He is caved in online, Daniel, the Dr. Shriver. What is going on, my friend?
I'm hanging in there, David. Right before we started recording, my wife sent me this New York Times article that was called, "Would You Date a Podcast Bro?" And I still have not recovered from that article yet. It made me want to shut the whole show down, quite frankly. So this is the final episode of Faithless Brewing, but it's been a fun journey with all of you.
That's awesome. Well, you did say you were hanging in there like the frickin' cat poster at work, so exactly. I can't really support this podcast anymore either.
The article was very short, very to the point. Just like 3 anecdotes that just revealed everything you need to know. Just like random individuals on dating sites.
Well, no, they got to do like a marry, fuck, kill or whatever. Podcast bro, like, who's that guy that just got arrested in Romania? Tate, whatever, bro. And then like CrossFit bro. And then, there's a bunch of bros, right?
That's true.
And you got to just figure, you got to order them. You got to hierarchically, determine. Because if you're a gay man or a heterosexual woman, you're stuck. we're what's for dinner. It sucks. You wish you were more attracted to people who weren't morons, but this is who we are. So you got to figure out which bro is tolerable is the key.
They could definitely make the article into like a series, like "Would You Date a Bro?" and you just keep modifying that with different times. What are you going to do?
Well, talking to my single female friends, it is a tough world out there if you're a 38-year-old woman with a college degree trying to find a partner that treats you with a little bit of respect.
My God. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again for being with us. Thanks for sharing your day with us, podcast bros, as we're going to yap at you about some magic cards. Yeah, it'll be a fun journey, I hope. What's on the docket for today, David?
Today, we are going to investigate the winner of our most recent card of the month. It is Malcator Purity Overseer, and I believe the person that nominated Malcator is DJeff MTG. So before we get into that, we need to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we will discuss DJeff MTG's little scheme for us. So, as always, just a reminder, if you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to support us, the best way to do that is to go to patreon.com/faithlessbrewing and join at whatever level you feel comfortable with. It is the best way to support the show, and you get to vote in specifically this poll. You get to nominate cards if you're at a certain level. And then, once we're here, we're going to spend the month trying to figure this card out, trying to solve the mystery of the Elephant Wizard.
That's right. And I'm just realizing right now that I forgot to ask him if he prefers to go by DJeff, or I think his name is actually Dylan, but I'm not sure. That's his screen name. So we're just going to keep calling him DJeff. Not only did he nominate this card, but he ran the whole marketing campaign. He put together like a little political poster for it and definitely rallied the troops. Obviously won you over immediately, David. You heartily endorsed Malcator during our little campaign season, and people were convinced this card ran away with it. Well, not ran away, but was a clear winner.
Yeah, and I know that DJF MTG is in the Discord. He's posting lists. There's lots of people with a lot of ideas in the Discord going back and forth on different ways to build it. It's interesting to see little convergence evolution. Some of the kind of shells that people were talking about, similar to some of the kind of shells we're about to talk about here from us. Yeah, we just have to find out if we can find any success. That's the hope. That's the dream.
All right, so kicking off Project Malcator. This is our first attempt at the card. Malcator Purity Overseer, 1 blue-white legendary creature, Phyrexian Elephant Wizard. When Malcator enters a battlefield, create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. At the beginning of your end step, if 3 or more artifacts enter the battlefield under your control this turn, create another 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. And I forgot to mention Malcator's base stats are a 1/1. He is a 1/1 elephant. Not sure what happened there.
Yeah, that's my only negative on this card. The 1/1 elephant part is way off. And like Purity Overseers kind of sounds like a religious camp counselor, right? Who like makes you sign like a virginity pledge or something.
Oh, I was like, isn't this your job description, David? Isn't this what you do like for a living?
Purity Overseer?
Kind of, right? Like you make sure everything's done by the book. Like you're a chemist, right?
Yeah, we don't use the term purity for that kind of work that we do in the medical device world, but looks like he's absolutely going ham on somebody on the surgical table.
A completed elephant is a 1/1. I've never guessed that.
Yeah, so becoming Phyrexian is sort of like becoming Darth Vader. You lose your power as the most powerful Jedi ever. Now you can just like lose to Obi-Wan, lose to Luke Skywalker. Like any other Jedi you got lying around, you just lose to him. Half man, half machine, not good, it turns out. Or half elephant, half machine.
So not a lot of details to this card in terms of rules notes. The creature types, Phyrexian could matter if you want to do like Pyre of Heroes. There's a lot of Phyrexians now, and this is actually the only Phyrexian that has a clean value ETB trigger. It is a wizard as well. If you want to maybe assemble a wizard's deck, you could play Naban on turn 2, play Malcator on turn 3, and you would double trigger that. The timing of the end of turn trigger, so it has that intervening if clause. That means that you have to have met the condition before you get to the end step. Right, so generating your third artifact during the end step is not going to help you at all. And this is going to be relevant if you're trying to do like a slow blink, if I can use that expression, like a Flicker Wisp or a Yorion Sky Nomad, something that brings Malcator back in the end step. That artifact will not count towards the total.
Right, Charming Prince is another card, especially in Pioneer, that people have often proposed pairing with this.
Ah, yeah, that's a great one. And also just note that Malcator does not have to be in play when these artifacts enter. So you can generate your first 2 artifacts before you cast Malcator, and then Malcator, the game knows that you've had 3 enter that turn.
Yes.
And I think that's about it in terms of rules notes. So what do you see when you look at this card, David?
So I believe the first list that we ever talked about for this podcast involved Blade Splicer and
yes.
Restoration Angel. So, of course, Blade Splicer, even then, to give ourselves a little bit of credit, I think we had some success that week, a couple of 4/1s. But it was already maybe a little speculative, let's just say, in the modern power level. And of course, we know with Modern Horizons and Modern Horizons 2, we're not going to beat a dead horse here, but the power level of the format has increased. And just in general, any non-rotating format gets more powerful every year. Cards that seem playable, right? We're talking about Wild Mikado being banned, and then, for a while it was unplayable, and now somehow it's playable again. So I see a Blade Splicer-like effect in Pioneer, where there are just like mid-range decks. Like you just play a deck that has like efficient threats, efficient cards on 1 and 2 and 3. So just as like a mid-range card, this absorbs all of the mana of a fully used Bone Crusher Giant, and it does it at 3 mana. That's like the baseline to me. And the Blade Splicer effect of giving First Strike, I actually never cared about at all, because I never wanted to like attack into something and hope like you could always lose First Strike in response to your combat step.
Oh, right, yeah.
So I never assumed it had First Strike. So this having this other text, which you maybe want to reach for. You don't need to like build a deck around it. I don't think you want to be all in when you're playing Ornithopter or something, but just a little bit something more to like tempt you. So it still has that like brewer thing that we like, where there's like a mission that we must complete. If we complete it, we get like our little reward, right? Our food pellet comes down into our rat cage as we spin the wheel fast enough. But the fail case being so good, or what I'm suggesting is so good, so reasonable, is very interesting to me.
Yeah, because there isn't really a comparable effect in Pioneer. There is currently not a Blade Splicer in Pioneer.
No, this is kind of like a Fable.
Yeah.
Right, where it has much more power the turn it's played and significantly less power on turn 5. Right, the way the cards work. So if you get to turn 5 with Fable and your opponent hasn't interacted with you, Fable's much more powerful than this. But on turn 3, this is a much better play, especially on the draw. Fable on the draw is actually quite poor. It trades with nothing, right? The 2/2 just does nothing. This is actually, we'll talk about it with one of the lists. This just trades with their 3-drop and leaves a 1-drop that actually has text. Normally, it's not really a 2-for-1. It's like a 1/1 isn't worth a card. But if you at least have the threat of making 3 artifacts, they actually have to kill this. It's a card they at least have to consider killing, right? They have to sacrifice their Blood Tithe Harvester. They have to cast a push after they sacrifice a Trider, just to make sure. If they can't do it now, then you might get another Golem in the future. And that Golem is a full card.
And they don't know how you built your deck. Like, we know that we bent our entire deck to try to generate 3 artifacts in one turn. But for all they know, we're just going to blink it with Charming Prince. So they have to respect it. They have to respect the 1/1. It's too dangerous to be left alive.
And the other thing that just is sort of a corner case, but you and I love this card, is Mox Amber is a card we just are fascinated with. And so Mox Amber working with this, so this sort of like ramps if you want to 5 the turn after you play it with Mox Amber, or Mox Amber the turn it comes down, triggering extra Golem. You can kind of get something 2 ways. That's always just interesting to me. Like, we always mention these cheap legends. Mox Amber is a card that does work here. Worth thinking about.
Yeah, your most elegant sequence is going to be playing this even on turn 3 and having it immediately get that end of turn trigger. And that would require something like a Mox Amber for your second artifact, which you can then tap and cast like a Skrelv or something, which also works with Mox Amber, we should note. And that's 3 artifacts on turn 3, gets you that extra bonus Golem. Now the question on my mind, and this came up as I was like following the discussion in our Discord channel and looking at some of your proposals, a lot of the hoops we might be tempted to jump through to get that end of turn trigger, to get that little biscuit, they're kind of a lot of work, and the end result is not that much more powerful than just like casting 1 Asika's Chariot. You know what I mean? Like, an Asika's Chariot with nothing else is 8/8 from 1 card with the potential for more. Malcator by itself is 4/4 for 1 card, but with some help you can make it a 7/7 worth of stats from 1 card. Not saying these are directly in competition with each other, but it was kind of a reminder for me that, like, okay, the power ceiling that we're talking about here is not super high. Like, decks are equipped to have this kind of thing happen to them, to like have an opponent suddenly generate a lot of tokens. It doesn't necessarily just win the game.
No, it doesn't. It absolutely does not win the game. That's why I don't like this idea. You've seen some proposals. Will Urker, this is a streamer that we're big fans of here. He's had a lot of lists where he's playing like Ornithopter, some cards that are like lower power to try to really kind of nut draw, as you're describing. And I think the times when they kill your Malcator, with its trigger on the stack before your end step, or the times where you draw your Ornithopters are not your Malcator, or your Malcator early, and then later you draw your Ornithopter, and you're like, well, this doesn't do anything. Those are just too common and the nut draw isn't powerful enough to justify them. So I think that's an important sort of thing to think about.
Yeah, so is the juice going to be worth the squeeze, as David would say? And that includes not just what are we doing to try to assemble 3 artifacts in 1 turn or to play blink effects, but also, like, are the colors going to be an issue? Malcator is blue and white, and a lot of the cards you might want to pair with Malcator stray into a 3rd or maybe even a 4th color. And in Pioneer especially, we've seen how costly that can be. Like, even if you can consistently generate the colors, it means you're not really going to play any utility lands. You're going to take a lot of shock damage that other decks don't have to do.
Yeah, a real cost if you aren't just playing 2 colors, and that's very consistent.
All right, so those are some big picture things to keep in mind. In terms of key synergies, fairly straightforward. We're looking for anything that blinks. That's fine, you know. Elesh Norn, you can do that. Works with Mox Amber. Malcator works with Collected Company. If you're on Modern, you can ephemerate, etc. The end of turn trigger tells you exactly what to do. It just says generate 3 artifacts by hook or by crook, whatever you can do to make 3 artifacts in 1 turn. David, you already mentioned a couple ways to do it, like with Mox Amber. There was like a Deadly Dispute line you told me about that I think we're going to see in a minute here. If you're in Modern, which I actually think there's some potential for Malcator in Modern as well, there's a very clean way to do it just with Urza Saga. You know, Urza Saga, Chapter 3 happens, you get a cookbook. That's 1 artifact. Tap the cookbook. Now you have 2 and Malcator is 3. So that's one way you can do that. And I think the most exciting card for me is the original Saheeli Planeswalker, Saheeli Rai, classic Saheeli. It so happens that her -2 effect that copies an artifact or creature, the one that goes infinite with Felidar Guardian, happens to generate an artifact copy of whatever the thing is that you're copying. So if you happen to use this targeting Malcator, you'll get a second Malcator, which has to get legend rolled away, but that's fine. You know, you don't need that one. That one that died was an artifact, so that's 2 golems right there, plus the dead Malcator is 3 artifacts. You've met the condition for your original Malcator, and you're getting 3 golems that turn if the Malcator survives. So there's definitely like potential there, and we'll see some other packages and different cards you can stack up to like make this happen as we jump into the lists.
Yeah, so the first one kind of tries to deal with the issue that Dan's describing. Blue-white, not the best for kind of what we want to do. So one of the ways, if you want to play a mid-range deck, is you want to play black, right? The reason red-black is so good is it gets to play Push and Thoughtseize, and those are, I don't know how you want to make your list, but up there with Mana Elf, those are Treasure Cruise. Those are the 4 most powerful cards in the format. You can pick your order. I won't argue with you. So we just want to play those too, right? We're a mid-range deck. Malcator isn't winning the game immediately. Dan just told us why. So what do we do to make our blue mana? So if we have a Shambling Ghast in play on turn 3 and we Deadly Dispute it, we can choose to make a treasure with the Dead Ghast and a treasure from the Deadly Dispute. Then we draw 2. So we're not down a card. We just spent 2 mana. We get 2 mana back. We get 2 cards back. And then we can cast Malcator. And as Dan said, it doesn't need to have been in play when the treasures came into play. It knows that they came into play. So that's just a very simple, clean way to generate Malcator on turn 3. And the treasures fix the mana. So even if we don't draw any of our blue lands, we're not playing that many. We actually just generated the 1 blue that we need to generate Malcator. And the treasures also mean that Fatal Push is actually incredible in this deck. And then just in general, like Ghast is an okay card. I always liked it a little bit more than basically everybody else. If you're on the play, you can Deadly Dispute your Ghast as like basically a card positive way to kill their Mana Elf. Against mono white, obviously it's amazing. It trades with Thalia no matter what. Kills random 1/1s. Trades with Fable Token, right? Like it's a little better than people think. And like I said, if the Deadly Disputing of it has relevance, then that's something. So the rest of our deck just tries to take advantage of the fact that we have a bunch of tokens lying around. So we're playing the 4 Malcator, 2 Rite of Oblivion because we've got a bunch of stuff to sacrifice to it. 2 Thraben Inspector, again, a card that works well with Rite of Oblivion, that's known. LAA11 from our Discord has had a bunch of success with that type of shell. Thraben Inspector creates an artifact, if that ends up mattering. 3 Servo Exhibition, again, a card that works well if we're generating tokens, can help us get our 3 artifacts. 2 Kaya. Kaya is nice with all the random crappy creatures we have lying around because she gives them Death Touch when she comes into play. So they all trade. Your opponent just can't pick them off. If she comes into play and doesn't die, her -2 doubles the tokens we get from Deadly Dispute. A sacked Shambling Ghast, Malcator itself, Servo Exhibition, Thraben Inspector, and Sram's Esper-tise. Her plus also does plus tokens. So we have a few creature tokens lying around. The golems, the tokens we get from Sram's Esper-tise, the Servo Exhibition tokens. And then because we're playing all these Deadly Disputes, I'm also playing Malcator Rebirth. Malcator Rebirth plus Deadly Dispute on a Malcator means we only have to find one other artifact, and we get the Malcator coming to play trigger again, and then we get another, as like, let's say we find a Thraben Inspector or something, we just cast it and get our artifact there. So, and then I'm playing 2 Phyrexian Fleshgorger. That works well with the kind of Deadly Dispute, Malcator Rebirth. If they just kill it and you Malcator Rebirth it, obviously that's great.
Yeah, I was wondering why the Flesh Gorgers were there, because at first I thought, oh, you have this Sram's Esper-tise, maybe you can cheat it in with the Esper-tise effect, but it turns out that you are not allowed to do that. If you're trying to play it off Esper-tise, you have to pay the prototype cost, which is just a 3/3 size.
Yeah, so it is something you can put in play, but you don't get to cheat the 7/5 in play. You just get your 3/3.
Yeah, but it is nice that you can kind of make this Malcator Rebirth line happen whenever you want, because you have so many sac effects.
Yeah, and just Malcator Rebirth in general. Just, we're playing 25 mana sources. It's just a value land that's on plan for us, so it's nothing special. But there's going to be some times when, Phyrexian Fleshgorger blocks Bone Crusher Giant, and you just Malcator Rebirth it. That's going to happen some amount of the time.
So looking at the list here, I really like the way that you've accounted for generating the blue off the treasures. Most of these cards feel battle-tested and proven to me, except for, you know which ones I'm going to say. It's the Servo Exhibition and the Kaya Ghost Hunter and the Sram's Esper-tise. These are not staples. They're not cards we really see in Pioneer. Is that because they just haven't found the right homes, or are they just like a little bit underpowered for what they do?
Yeah, I think the underpowered part. I've actually played a ton of lists with Kaya. Not ever talked about them on the show. I don't think that much. Just experimented with like Kaya and Wedding Announcement, a bunch of other types of shells. Never quite found the right deck for her. But yeah, like if you have a card that's just generating tokens, so her plus gives Death Touch and a +1/+1 counter, that's actually kind of interesting. Again, it means that Malcator can't just be blocked. It has to trade with something. Servo Exhibition is the card I'm least certain of. I wanted some kind of 2-drop that would at least block for Kaya if I played on curve. I'm not sure what the best card would be. It could be the one in a, well, I don't know what it would be. This happens to make 2 artifacts, so I was willing to try it. I have played it a couple times in like shells with improvise and stuff like that, and thought it was okay, not terrible, not great. So yeah, the card I would, if you're really looking to switch something out, I would get rid of Servo Exhibition. You could play like 2 extra Thraben Inspectors. The card is fine, not great, not bad. That's the first place I'd start.
Having criticized the Servo Exhibition, I'm now going to suggest an even worse card, Servo Schematic. Have you considered Servo Schematic? Because this one can generate 3 artifacts by itself if you have access to your Rite of Oblivion, which will be in the graveyard, presumably, or your Deadly Dispute.
What does Servo Schematic do?
It's a 2-mana artifact that generates 1 servo when it enters and 1 servo when it dies. So you have to kind of unlock the second servo by sacrificing it, and then you get your second servo. But just casting it by itself is 2 artifacts.
It's not terrible. I don't think that's unreasonable. I just have to try it. I don't know. It's not unplayable.
Yeah.
The other thing you could play is the white-black enchantment that triggers whenever you get a 1/1 at the end of your turn if a permanent left play.
Oh, the Hidden Stockpile. Yeah, that's got that timing issue where it just comes too late,
Yeah, it doesn't work with Malcator, but it works well with the rest of the deck. Yeah, I never liked that card. I always thought it was a little too clunky.
What about the White Bitter Blossom? This is one that I saw people in our Discord talking about. Skrelv's Hive, I think that's what it's called. Skrelv's Hive?
Yeah.
Do you think that would be appropriate for this deck? Because that gives you the artifact token on your upkeep.
Yeah, so it never ever works with Kaya, but that's not the end of the world. It does put you on a clock, which is a little nervous. I guess we have some life gain with Phyrexian Fleshgorger. I think that card's often better as a 4-of with other ways to generate. But it's worth trying. Again, like Servo Exhibition isn't that good, so I'm not like I'm willing to try any card in that slot because they all kind of do the same thing, right? We want bodies that we can sacrifice reasonably profitably. We want random artifacts that can come into play for Malcator. And we want something that Kaya can kind of help, make a little bit better. And so it does all those things, and it doesn't block. So again, it doesn't seem to fit like in a mid-range type of shell, and that's what makes me nervous. Is it kind of like puts the clock on you?
Yeah, I actually forgot that it loses life, but it gives lifelink eventually.
Eventually, yeah. If you get to 3, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that land Mirex is actually one that I was testing. We talked on our Monday show about this colorless Eldrazi deck, and I actually did try the land that generates, what are they called? Might tokens?
Yeah.
It's pretty cheap for generating an artifact token, so color requirements probably don't allow it here, but a card to keep in mind.
I would say if you don't like Sram's Expertise, and I'm not saying that's wrong or right, I think there's just a lot of other cards you could try. There's a bunch of 4-mana Planeswalkers that work well with token generators. They don't specifically work with Malcator, but that's okay. You can play the 4-mana Sorin that gives +1/+1 lifelink to all your creatures. You can play 4-mana Gideon. You can play the 4-mana Sorin that makes the 2/3 vampire or pluses to draw. If you want to be like even more mid-rangey and like away from the tokens, you can go the full Phyrexian 4 Flesh Gorgers and full 4 Malika Rebirths. You can go that way. There's lots of things you can do. You don't have to be like all in on the Malcator. And the mana is super flexible because you're a white blacklist. You can play main deck Shieldred, right? You just play 2 Shieldred at the top and 2 Phyrexian Flesh Gorger and extra Rebirth, and no Sram's Expertise and no Servo Exhibition.
Okay.
And like main deck of Vanishing Verse. Like you can make your deck very mid-rangey. The blue splash is like literally borderline free. I'm not playing any blue sideboard cards. So I think you can go as far in or as far out as you want, and your deck is very, very good at just trading resources, right? Like Thoughtseize, Push, Phyrexian Flesh Gorger. Like these are just cards you can play. Like Flesh Gorger is going to gain 3 every turn, and when they try to kill it, you have a chance to Malika Rebirth it. You haven't done any combo thing. You haven't cast any weird cards.
Yeah, I'm tempted to try that, although I guess we should try the Expertise, just give it a chance and see if it...
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this list. Nobody has to play the speculative cards. And if it's terrible, then it's just like, okay, let's just play a few less speculative cards, and then that's just how we'll leave it like that. I mean, if you want to get like super crazy, there's a 5-mana Angel that can make 2 1/1s when it comes into play, and it pumps all your creatures. Like Deadly Dispute does help you ramp up to that.
Oh shit! Yeah, the God Pharaoh's Gift Angel.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's played in God Pharaoh's Gift. That's the only reason we know it. I don't even know what the mechanic is, but you either give it +2/+2, or you make 2 servos.
I think it's Fabricate 2, and the card is Angel of Invention.
Angel of Invention. So yeah, you could play like 2 of those. Again, any card that pumps power is actually really good if you're playing Phyrexian Flesh Gorger, right? We found that like making the front side better is a very useful thing to do, so that's worth trying. And that is like not that far off the plan. Like if you have a Kaya in play and you -2 it and you play that and you get 4 2/2s and a 2/1 flying that pumps all your creature. Like anyway, there's just lots of things to do.
Mm-hmm.
The Sram's Expertise is like the highest upside, right? You could imagine push something on 2, play Kaya plus it. They can't kill it. I -2 her, Sram's Expertise into Malcator. And we end up with 4 3/3s and 6 1/1s, right? And the game is over. And, I just want to see, like, is that a thing you can do? You can even, like, with Malcator already in play, Sram's Expertise into Kaya and just -2 her because Malcator is going to make a 3/3 at the end of the turn. So she just, like, -2s to give you an extra 3/3. So I just, like, those lines exist. I don't know how common they're going to be. But I'm willing to, play the more speculative cards in the brew stage at least. And maybe we do come back to, all right, Shieldred's just so much better than the base level, the floor of Sram's Expertise. We don't care about the combo, and maybe that's just the way to play.
I accept this deal. All right. Well, I look forward to your report. From the Esper-tise Expertise, we move on now to blue-white.
All right, so people keep saying blue-white's just not a good mid-range color. Well, you and I have played a lot of blue-white mid-range in this format. And we kind of like it because we get to move cards around from one place on the board, maybe from our graveyard, maybe to hand. Maybe we're drawing lots of cards. So this deck is similar to some of the shells we played before. And one of the complaints you had is like, we're playing this Ingenious Smith, we're playing this Patchwork Automaton. And when I'm playing against Red-Black, the sort of preeminent mid-range list, it's really hard for me to like trade resources because I have to cast all these cards to get my Smith big enough to trade with their Graveyard Trespasser. And they're shocking my Smith, and they're playing this 4/3, and it takes a bunch of artifacts to get Patchwork Automaton enough, and then he just trades, right? And we're down a card.
Yeah.
So Malcator kind of solves that problem, right? It puts a body in play right away that trades. It trades with every 3 mana play that Red-Black plays, and every 2 mana play. It blocks and kills that 2 or 3 mana creature, or in the case of the Fable token, dominates it. They have to cast another spell. Then we put the artifact shell around it. So we're still playing for Smith. We're still playing for Patchwork Automaton. We're still playing a couple Metallic Rebukes. 3 Reckoner Bankbuster. I think Dan, you and I have kind of agreed that's just the better value card of all these cards. It's just a fine card. It's very good when we have Tezzerator in play. A couple Mox Ambers, because we do have the 4 Malcator to justify them, I think, and the Tezzerator to loot them away. 4 Portable Holes is our removal spell. We have so many come into play effects. I snuck an Elesh Norn in there. Just a super sweet card. It's sweet with Malcator. It's really sweet with Ingenious Smith. It doubles both triggers. Doubles the triggers on Portable Hole. We're playing the full 4 Darksteel Citadel. I know you're worried about missing land drops. So we're playing 23 lands. 4 of them are artifacts to find with Ingenious Smith. 3 Tezzerator. Again, I think this card's very good. We're going to continue experimenting with that. 1 Sai, obviously that can make artifacts to trigger our Malcator. 1 Touch the Spirit Realm, that's just our 1 main deck way of killing Shieldred, so I don't have to hear you complain about it. And we have a bunch of stuff that's valid. We can value Blink, so it can be a removal spell or not. And gets a little bit better with Elesh Norn. And then on the top of everything is 1 of Sky Sovereign, just a very powerful artifact and easier for us to crew now because we have Malcator. We have a lot more 3-power creatures just lying around.
Yeah, I didn't think about this shell at all as a potential home, but I really like it. I especially like how it makes the Reckoner Bankbuster like a pretty solid turn 2 play in a way that it wasn't before. Like before, I felt like we were playing the Reckoner Bankbuster because we had to have like this grindy option, but it wasn't realistic to attack with it. You're not going to curve out with a Reckoner Bankbuster in the old version of this deck, but now you can, right? It's crew 3. You could just play the Bankbuster on 2, play Malcator on 3, and attack for 4. And then, later in the game, you can get your cards if you want. And that kind of complements the, maybe I'm aggro, maybe I'm not, depending on what the matchup calls for, between the Patchworks, the Ingenious Smiths, and the Reckoner Bankbusters.
Yeah, still playing 2 Combat Courier. This is an artifact that can come into play from the graveyard if we need to trigger, possibly help us trigger Malcator. Really moved away. The previous list had a lot of Moonsnare Prototype, Springleaf Drum, less consistent mana. I know you disliked that. And we just don't need it as much. And you just have a natural curve of Ingenious Smith onto whatever, they stomp it. Ingenious Smith can find you the Darksteel Citadel or the Mox Amber, and then next turn you play Malcator with your Darksteel Citadel, and then your Mox Amber, etc. So Ingenious Smith helps your Malcator plan. Like, you're not all in on the combo, but it just makes it much more likely without having to play, in my opinion, any bad cards. We don't mind playing Darksteel Citadel because Ingenious Smith wants us to keep hitting our land drops, and we do go all the way up to 5 mana. The Mox Ambers aren't as bad because we're playing enough Legends main deck, including a Reality Chip. And Ingenious Smith has 25 hits. Before we were a little lighter than that. So it is just a way to make our draw smoother. It's a fine value card. It helps us hit our land. Then it also helps the Malcator nut draw. And I think Ingenious Smith is a good card. So as Zach says, if you can make it into a Tarmogoyf that draws a card, this is just a great thing to be doing. And so that's what we're trying to do.
This is a proper Blade Splicer list, right? Like we're not really doing anything to try to get 3 artifacts in one turn. It might happen once, but that's not the point of Malcator in this deck.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and it fits beautifully. So excited to try this one. I think I might start with something like this just because, I have the memory of getting crushed by Rakdos seared into my mind. I just what? I need a redemption arc for this archetype.
The sideboard is full of stuff that kills. That's great against red black, by the way. The other card I want to point out that's in a lot of these sideboards because we're playing white is Sundering Growth. This is a card people don't really think about because mono white lists don't really have a need for it. Well, it's a 2-mana instant disenchant. And if you're going to play a disenchant effect and you're going to play Malcator, you should at least consider this. If you think of it as like a 2-mana instant 3/3, you can see how much better it is than something like Lauren in a mono white list, or even Night of Autumn in a green white list. The card's just really powerful if you have tokens. And a lot of these lists have some tokens to copy, right? We had a bunch more random, treasures or whatever in the other list. But if you're playing for Malcator and the last two lists are, you should at least consider Sundering Growth as a sideboard card. It's very, very powerful.
I did not know that was Pioneer legal. Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, that's what Rhett said. He's like, I didn't know that card was around. It's like, the populate cards are legal. They just aren't good. But Sundering Growth is a great sideboard card if you have tokens.
All right. So that is an update to the blue-white Tezzerator, now with Blade Splicer.
All right, next up is a Jeskai shell. Now, yeah, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. This sort of Saheeli Malcator interaction is very good for like the fair plan, right? You play Saheeli on 3, you +1 it, do one of them, and then next turn you play Malcator, copy it. Okay. We also know that Saheeli works with other artifacts we might want to play in our deck, and those are Luxior and Altar of the Brood. It combines with those 2 cards to mill our opponent out. Now, should you play these do-nothing artifacts in a deck with Saheeli? The answer is I don't know. But in theory, Malcator helps you a little bit, because just playing a random artifact can matter, on turn 4 or 5, if it's going to give you another Golem. And to kind of help those cards matter a little bit more, we're also playing Third Path Iconoclast. So if we have a Third Path Iconoclast in play, and we cast a Malcator and then an Altar of the Brood, we actually get our 3 artifacts that way. Third Path Iconoclast makes an artifact. When we cast the Altar itself is an artifact. So we're trying to mitigate the fact that these cards are very bad. Now, I don't know if they're worth doing. You can see on my sideboard just as something to plant in our mind. I have 4 Karn the Great Crater. You can make the list. Maybe play 4 Karn main. Maybe go up to a Urian build. I like to play Urian when I'm playing Karn, because we're just saying our sideboard doesn't matter. And then you only have to play 1 Altar, 1 Luxior, right? And they're in your sideboard. Your main deck can be all good cards. But the rest of this is just spells, right? Fiery Impulse, Consider, Spell Pierce, Censor, Fable. Fable and Saheeli both also trigger Third Path Iconoclast. Malcator, the combo pieces, 24 lands, and a Dig Through Time.
So you mentioned there's a good chunk of spells here. That's your interaction and your selection. That's your Fiery Impulse and your Consider and your Censors. But are those there just because you want to support the Third Path Iconoclast? Or do you just think they generally are the cards you want to be doing on the first couple turns?
Yeah, those are cards I want to play anyway if I'm going to play Saheeli. Because I want to play Saheeli on an empty board, because we actually want Saheeli in play before Malcator. And it's hard, right? Saheeli does not protect itself. Its plus is very bad. So we want to censor their 3-drop, play our Saheeli plus it, and then they, play their 4-drop or whatever, and then we do our thing with Malcator or our Fable token or whatever. So I want to play those cards anyway. I want to play Third Path Iconoclast, I think, because it triggers on everything except for the 3 Malcators. It triggers on Fable. It triggers on Saheeli. We do we want to play a fair plan? Do we want to play all in on the fair plan? We're adding Malcator. It's the only white card, right? Is it even worth doing? I mean, are we adding this fair card? Do we want to be all in on the fair plan and just not play Luxior and Altar of the Brood at all? There's just a bunch of different ways you can take this. I don't know what the best way to do it is.
So Saheeli Rai famously combos with Felidar Guardian. Felidar was one of the first cards banned in Pioneer. It's just too easy to do.
Yep.
You can still combo with Saheeli. It requires 3 cards, 2 of which do absolutely nothing. That's the issue that David's wrestling with here, right? Luxior, equip it to Saheeli Rai because it equips to a Planeswalker, and now she can copy herself, and each copy can keep copying herself. That doesn't accomplish anything. You need to add that 3rd piece, and that's what the Altar of the Brood is. So you're kind of looking at Luxior and Altar being blanks, and you have to put enough of them in to find all of these pieces if you want to do the combo. I was curious, David, if you thought about the card Exuberant Fuseling. So this is something that came up. I think DJ found this when he was looking at potential payoffs to the Saheeli combo. The Fuseling is just a creature, right? It's like a 0/1 trample. It comes with an oil counter, and it picks up more oil counters the more things die. because technically the legend rule Saheeli, when you're doing this loop, is an artifact dying, you actually grow an infinite power exuberant fuseling. And you could theoretically play that instead of the altar as like a sort of playable, like a card that actually does something. It attacks and blocks, whereas altar does nothing.
Well, I think there's a 1/3 for 2 that does a damage to your opponent every time an artifact comes into play. I think I'd rather play that because it also works with Third Path Iconoclast.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it's a 1/3. It might be a 1/2.
I know the card you mean. Yeah, 1/3, Reckless Fireweaver. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to do that, and maybe that's the way to, again, like you can tell there's a bunch of different options. You can play Wandering Mind if you want to be in on the combo. That's actually like kind of sweet to copy with Saheeli. You just see like a shit ton of your deck. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can go. And maybe Malcator is like actually taking us off the wrong path. It's like, oh, it's kind of this fair plan we have in the background. It's like, oh, maybe the fair plan's not even worth doing because we never win the fair plan, or maybe Third Path Iconoclast is the actual fair plan, and we don't need to actually splash white. But again, the white splash just seems so free when you have a card like Fable that adds random treasure tokens.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so it's a blue-red core. You're only splashing the third color for something for Saheeli to copy for value. We've seen that Chariot, Asika's Chariot, that is actually works beautifully with Saheeli as well, and that's also splashable. Actually, that was one of the first Chariot synergies we explored in this podcast.
Yeah, I don't know if you or I found it, but you played a bunch of sweet lists. Yeah. A bunch of like teamer lists.
In Modern even, it was like powerful enough for Modern. Turns out Chariot's just like one of the best cards in whatever format it's in. So you could maybe just say Chariot's better than Malcator and play this shell as teamer. That would not work for Malcator week, obviously. But it's worth remembering.
It is cool that Chariot triggers Third Path Iconoclast as well. Like,
yeah,
that just seems sweet to me. And maybe yeah.
And I mean, I'll explain the interaction since I see Chariot in your next list here. So the way this works is you have Saheeli, you played her on 3, you upticked her. Now you play your Asika's Chariot on 4, generate 2 cats, Saheeli -2, copy the Chariot. Legend rule happens, and you're going to actually keep the token Chariot this time. So you've lost your original Chariot. Now you have 2 additional cats, so 4 cats total, and a token copy of Chariot that has haste. Crew that, attack with it. It has an attack trigger that copies any token in play, or on your side at least. It can actually copy itself because it is a token copy of Chariot. So you can now use that attack trigger from the temporary Chariot to make a permanent token copy of Chariot. So legend rule happens again, and now you can choose. If you want 4 damage, you should keep the temporary one, but you probably just want more cats, in which case you keep the permanent one. You end up with 6 cats, plus a token copy of Chariot that is still a token for all future turns. So you added, how much did you add? 6 cats, that's 12? Is that right?
12
plus
power.
A 4/4?
Plus a Chariot.
So you got 16 power out of that.
Well, you always describe the Chariot as having this extra power. That's not always true. So I guess I want to push back when that Chariot adds 8 power to the board for 4 mana. That's not often the case.
Fair enough.
The play you're describing is awesome. You had a bunch of sweet lists. I forget what Chariot week was. We thought it was just kind of almost like a knockoff, and the card was just awesome. Did you 5-0 in Modern?
I did, yeah. And we had like a teamer ramp in Pioneer that used the Regisaur Alpha. It's like another thing for Saheeli to copy.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, so that's like why you would consider Chariot and Saheeli together. And it's just cool that Malcator also combos with Saheeli. Which brings us perhaps to the next shell.
Yeah, so I don't really have a deck here. I just have kind of an outline. So 4 Portable Hole, 4 Caryatid, 4 Prosperous Innkeeper, 3 Saheeli, 3 Malcator, 4 Risen Reef, 2 Touch the Spirit Realm, and then 4 Chariot, 4 Omnath, 2 Teleportation Circle, 2 Elesh Norn. That's 36 cards with 8 mana sources in your 2-drop slot. So one of the things Dan has often said is, I hate having decks that don't have interaction on 1. We can actually cast Portable Hole on turn 1. Well, again, we're going to have to make the mana base here. It's going to be a dark journey. We don't have to play 12 plus Triumphs, though, with this shell. That's important to me. Caryatid I actually see DJF MTG is playing Goose in a lot of these shells. That might be better than Caryatid. It's an interesting idea. But I missed that. I wasn't thinking about that. That's something worth considering at least. Does make an artifact. Can be copied by Elesh Norn. Can tap for any mana of any color. Sylvan Caryatid is the more stable mana source, might be better. I haven't thought about it, but I saw that he was playing Gilded Goose, and I just wanted to point that out. Dan pointed out that Elesh Norn plus Omnath is insane because you get the 2 triggers right away. Saheeli Rai copying Malcator, great, we just described it. Saheeli Rai copying Esika's Chariot, great, we just described it. Saheeli Rai copying Risen Reef, actually way better than just copying a normal 3-mana draw card.
Oh. Because
the Risen Reef see each other, you get the 2 triggers there. Risen Reef with Omnath, great, obviously. Risen Reef with Elesh Norn, and then another, you see all the interior synergies here. Do you want to tweak some of the numbers one way or the other? The mana is going to be tough. You can probably play actually a ton of Shocklands, though. Or maybe even some of the 5-mana lands that do damage to you every time they tap, because Prosperous Innkeeper plus Elesh Norn gains so much life, and because Omnath gains so much life. So maybe you can just harm yourself to feel something, and you turn out okay on the other side.
So you noted that there's some similarities here to this Omnath to Light Shell that no longer plays Niv Mizzet, but does play Omnath, does play Caryatid, does play Elesh Norn. That deck actually sometimes plays Courier's Briefcase, it's just like a cheeky ramp option that makes a blocker, and then later in the game it does actually provide this source of card advantage. And I'm just wondering if that's possibly worth it. It's something you can copy, it's an artifact, it fixes your mana, it's potentially card advantage.
I had it in my next shell until I found this other card, and it might be better than that. I just wanted to put the other card in there. But yeah, that was something I considered. I had it in the first version of this shell and first version of the other shell.
Okay.
This shell, I think you do want the Caryatid. The stable mana ramp is actually really useful, I think. Again, playing Saheeli Rai and plussing it, which is what we're trying to do, is really important. And even if you play Saheeli Rai, chump block with Caryatid and get to do one of these things, that's going to be worth it. Like throwing away Caryatid, if you don't have one of your 4-drops that you end up playing, you want Saheeli Rai to be able to -2. It doesn't do anything else in these lists, right? If it can't -2.
True.
And we've all done it. We've played Saheeli Rai plus, done a damage to our opponent who's at 17 because we haven't hit them because we're playing this deck, and then we scry something to the bottom, and then they just kill it, and it's like, all right, that was a tough break.
Yeah, I think this deck will definitely do better when you don't have to play Saheeli immediately. If you're in a more leisurely value game, just deploy Saheeli last and you'll get a lot of value, but not every matchup's going to be like that. Sometimes you just got to race and get stuff on the board as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so this kind of basic shell is somewhat close to some of the proposed shells that DJF MTG and a few of the other individuals have in the Discord, where you're seeing the Prosperous Innkeeper is awesome with Elesh Norn. It's also kind of interesting with Saheeli in a pinch. It does leave a quote-unquote permanent ramp behind. And Prosperous Innkeeper does make an artifact. So with Elesh Norn in play and Malcator in play, Prosperous Innkeeper plus Portable Hole triggers Malcator again, just as an example. And the life gain ends up mattering a ton with Elesh Norn. The Prosperous Innkeeper, Elesh Norn, Esika's Chariot means red-black just can never kill you.
A good deck to crush Jund.
Exactly. All right, then the next one abandons red, but adds Gala Greeters, which is the other card I was talking about that sort of is like the briefcase. And Gala Greeters is really cute with Malcator because you get 2 bodies. So it triggers twice, and one of those triggers can create an artifact. So obviously the turn you play Malcator on turn 3, Gala Greeters will not trigger, but any future Malcators, if you have extra mana, does allow you to trigger.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about this card. So it can trigger up to 3 times in a turn, but never the same thing.
Right. So it's sort of like a homeless man's Omnath. If you have an Elesh Norn in play, you don't get to double any of those triggers. You just get all 3, right, as you cycle through them.
Okay, I see. You have to choose the separate effect for the second time it resolves.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so what we've lost now is we've lost that splash into the 4th color, so we're not getting Omnath anymore. We're not getting Saheeli anymore.
Right. Our mana is way better. We don't have to play Sylvan Caryatid. and we're just on a much more value plan. We're significantly less explosive, but our like mid-range is way more effective. We get to play the full 4 teleportation circle, which is very good with Combat Thresher. And teleportation circle is also amazing with Asika's Chariot. And it's actually really good with Malcator as well. So we're basically never going to trigger Malcator in this list. We're just going to blink it for value. It's just a pure value card here.
Yeah, I mean, this seems actually kind of similar to the Elesh, Norn, blink concepts that you were messing with during our week of testing. Is that going to be like where you actually win the game? Like, I assume that spending a bunch of turns blinking stuff, amassing value is fine, but like when you actually need to win the game, is it Elesh Norn that does it here, or do you think you can just make a Chariot and make a lot of cats?
Yeah, Chariot plus a bunch of cats. Chariot copying the Malcator token is actually pretty sweet. Just like upgrading your tokens to something that matters. And yeah, I mean, eventually, like Elesh Norn plus Asika's Chariot wins all the mid-range matchups. So you have to figure out how you're going to like win the non-fair matchups. And that's where things get tougher, right? The sideboard gets really taxed. And we'll talk about that when we talk about our Elesh Norn results. If you don't play a fair deck, these cards don't do a lot against what your opponent's doing.
So I play Prosperous Innkeeper on turn 2. I play Chariot on turn 3. Turn 4, I play Malcator. That's 1 artifact. That crews the Chariot. I attack for 8. Chariot triggers, copies the Golem. That's 2 artifacts. And I just need a 4th mana for a portable hole and 3 artifacts.
Yeah, that's all you need.
That's all you need. Those were good cards.
It's important to note that Malcator does crew Chariot exactly as you're describing. It gives you 4 power, and so the turn after Chariot, you actually do get to do your 8 power for 4 mana thing, and you get a 3/3 instead of a 2/2.
And if you add that 3rd artifact, you get an additional 3/3.
Yeah, exactly.
If 2 golems did not win it, perhaps a 3rd golem is what you were missing. All right. I mean, I like the concept. I like these little packages. I feel like we've identified a bunch of promising ones to explore. It all hinges on Malcator being like a fine play, like you were saying at the top. You know, the floor is high, right? This is a reasonable card, perhaps even above curve, if you have some reason to want to do it. And that's all in Pioneer. Just briefly about Modern. I actually think I will try Malcator in Modern. The only reason it's better than Blade Splicer, right? Blade Splicer is a card you can still play in Modern. And the only reason it's better is because of that end of turn trigger. And the only realistic way to do that is with Saheeli, as I think you'd agree with that. Saheeli is sort of fine in Modern. Like, Saheeli combo decks do 5-0. I think one was in the challenge last week. There's a few different ways to build it. Because Felidar Guardian is still legal, because you can always buy time with Solitudes and Furies and such, you can go a few different directions. You can just build regular ass 4-color Omnath, Elesh, Norn, good stuff that happens to play Saheeli and Felidar in there. I think a more interesting way to go is to like get a little bit lower to the ground and like really focus on like a lot of Saheelis, maybe a lot of Felidars, and you probably still need Solitude there. But you can get weird with it. Like, Saheeli has interesting things to copy lower on the curve. I'm kind of intrigued by Urza's Saga finding the pieces for these alternate Saheeli combos. Like, it finds Luxior, it finds Alter the Brood if you want that, and it finds Cookbook if you want to do the Saheeli Malcator. Not Saheeli. It finds Cookbook if you just want to generate that extra golem right away from Malcator, like we were talking about. So there could be something there as well, like in a Urza Saga focus version of a Saheeli combo deck where Malcator is not the focus by any stretch, but can be that supporting player that just gets you some bodies, make sure you have blockers for your Saheeli, and every once in a while will get you that extra golem that like a Blade Splicer can't do.
Yeah, and just a lot of the cards that Saheeli works well with Malcator, right? Mm-hmm. So like the cat can actually blink Malcator, and it does it in real time. It's not a delayed blink, like Charming Prince or Flicker Wisp. So if you had somehow other artifacts, if you're playing the Elemental package, you want to play Ephemerate. Ephemerate actually works with Malcator as well. You can play Malcator Ephemerate if that's already 2 artifacts right there for 4 mana. You get a free Ephemerate to start your next upkeep, so you like start out with a free artifact and play for no mana. So, I agree with you, Dan. It feels like there's something there. And I know that, I think you 5-0'd in Modern when we built like the cat, Asika's Chariot, Saheeli Rai. I think that was the shell that you 5-0'd with. So we already started, we're starting with something. And then from there, we're adding, it doesn't have to be 4 Malcators, just a couple Malcators. It's actually kind of on plan. We're playing Blink cards. We're playing Saheeli Rai. These cards all kind of work together. So what the combo of the right cards is the question.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to think about it this week. I'll see what Mord thinks, and, we'll let you know what we come up with when we check in on Malcator next time. But I think that's what we're going to say about Malcator for now. Now, before we head out, David, I do want to ask you about how your week went in terms of decks you were playing, because you were testing some interesting ones from last week's card.
Yeah, so our last week's card was Elesh Norn. A lot of people thought, okay, this is maybe just like a tutor target in our Enigmatic Incarnation decks, maybe a BTL target. And that's kind of what people have played, like a one of in an 80-card list. Not exactly upsetting the apple cart. Very powerful sometimes when it's in play. Obviously, there's matchups where it's good, where it's bad. I was liking it. Maybe it's just like a deck we actually build around. I thought it was a card we could ramp to somewhat reasonably within the confines of Pioneer. I thought it was actually really good against these decks. So, like, it just beats Enigmatic Incarnation by itself. They have 80, 95 cards. They cannot kill it. So I thought it was just like, you'd be able to play that. You'd get, like, maybe one free win a league. That didn't really happen. So I had a bunch of different shells. So I'm not going to talk about the first deck I played just because we have Evolution. So the first thing I found when I was tooling around with some lists before I proposed them last week was I was finding myself wanting Elesh Norn to play. It was so good. So I was like, what if I played 4 Eldritch Evolution? Then I'm playing a bunch of extra Elesh Norns. And I only have to play like 2 of them. My deck can be a lot cheaper. So went to 8 mana elves, 4 Oath of Nissa. Oath of Nissa is the best card in almost any Elesh Norn list. A couple Prosperous Innkeepers. Then we needed a bunch of 3. So I have 4 Llanowar Visionary, 4 Skyclave Apparition, 1 Knight of Autumn, 3 Asika's Chariot, just a generically powerful card, especially with Elesh Norn in play, obviously. 4 Combat Thresher, functionally a 3 mana cantrip. That leaves a 3 CC body in play. 2 Elesh Norn, and then a 1 of Tolsimir, both a card that's awesome with Elesh Norn in play, and just another 5-drop sometimes you want to tutor for. I ended up, unfortunately, playing just 5 decks that didn't care about Elesh Norn. I played Blue-Red Creativity with Gearhulk. Elesh Norn at least has a little bit of text there because it stops Gearhulk. Blue-Red Creativity playing the CFB PT list. I started 2-0 against these decks. The games were really close and really long. You do get to EE for sideboard cards, which felt really good. So I was able to kind of steal what I think is the first one. I think were okay, but the second one I thought was actually a pretty bad matchup. I think I was fortunate to win. And then the wheels kind of fell off. I played Blue Red Phoenix. They killed me with 1 card left in their deck, which they would have for sure lost because they had 2 conniving creatures in play. I would have forced them to die on my turn.
Oh.
And then they beat me in the second, and it took forever. I mean, they had like 6 minutes left on the clock. And then they beat me in the second game with like 20 seconds left. I was like, oh man, what a bummer. Like, the 5-0 was gone is what I was thinking at the time. Then I played Blue White Spirits, played by Darvik, a member of the Faithless Brewing family. Darvik was on Spirits, which is awesome against Eldritch Evolution and awesome against Elesh Norn. I did manage to win the second game, and Darshik threw down pretty early. I mean, he was going to for sure lose, but I was just accruing all his value, and then he had very good draws and played very well in game 3, so that was not particularly close. And then I replayed the CFB Blue-Red Creativity list and went 0-2, so that felt very fair to split matches with that individual, and they played very well as well. So Eldritch Evolution was pretty good. The main card that was terrible was Combat Thresher. The 1/1 body was terrible. We have no way to buff it. There just has to be a better 3-mana card that does anything. But the Eldritch Evolution like package into Elesh Norn was okay. The problem was we just didn't play decks where Elesh Norn was very good. So maybe you need to build the deck with like more silver bullety like main deck cards and just 1 Elesh Norn main. and kind of just not be all in on that. I'm not sure what the best way to do it is. But, once you get going in these mid-range matchups, it's very powerful, but we just didn't play any mid-range matchups, right? We played Spirits, we played 3 Creativities, and Blue-Red Phoenix.
So it's Eldritch Evolution for value, right? Like there's no combo at the end.
No combo, exactly.
You're kind of going card down to cast it and assuming that the Elesh Norn that you find is going to make up for all that.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the thought of playing all these creatures that draw. At least they come into play and draw. They replace themselves. And then Eldritch Evolution finds Elesh Norn, which decks do struggle to kill. And then, none of the decks that I played killed it, but I just couldn't get it into play.
Yeah. No, that seems like just bad matchup luck. But I do wonder, Eldritch Evolution, I think, is not a good card. It's not a card you should play in a fair deck. But you see a deck like Yawgmoth and Modern, they happily play as many copies of Eldritch Evolution as they can. And even though they have to sacrifice something, it's just worth it, right? It's just worth it. It's more mana efficient than Eladamri's Call, which is another card that people, will play 4 copies of in a Modern deck. So, if you're saying that Eldritch Evolution is just a fine card to tutor important creatures into play, then I think there's a lot of potential for this build.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to cut the combat threshers. That's easy. Eldritch Evolution finding silver bullets was way more important than it normally would be, again, because of the matchup luck. I don't think you want to play 4 Eldritch Evolution either, but the natural curve, turn 1 elf, turn 2 3-drop, and then if they just play their normal 2-drop and you EE into Elesh Norn and they can't kill it, you're just in an insanely good position. But I think the deck needs a little bit of reimagining, and I don't know that Eldritch Evolution is a fine value play if your opponent has counter magic, right? So I played Spirits, I basically had to just take them out. And if I play blue-white or blue-black, you'd have to take them all out. The sideboard cards just get crazy with how much you have to take out. So I think your deck is just weirdly polarized against other mid-range decks and is not great against super aggro. Although this would be good against a red type of aggro, but not good against a destructive aggro and not good against control. So
Voice of Resurgence seems like it could help with a lot of what you're describing. Did you try that in the 2 slot?
I had it in my sideboard and then Red talked me out of it, so we can blame him. I do actually like Eldritch Evolution with Sika's Chariot as well. It's worth noting.
How does that work?
Well, if you sacrifice Eldritch Evolution, you sacrifice that to Eldritch Evolution at some point, you get your 4-drop. Eventually, when you play Chariot, you just have this giant token that you get to copy. And the token is giant because the Chariot makes 2 cats when it comes into play. So the token you get from your voice.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. We're talking about Voice of Resurgence. Got you. I missed a step there. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Voice, it's just a natural pairing with Eldritch Evolution, but that depends on Voice being a fine card on its own, which is unclear.
Yeah. And then you kind of need to find a 4-drop that you want to fetch. And there's probably some reasonable ones that I'm just gapping on.
I was going to say Yasharn, but that turns off your Eldritch Evolution as well.
No, yeah. Yasharn has been a freaking letdown. I do not like that card.
All right. So more work to be done on the Eldritch Evolution green-white shell.
So yeah, then the one that I tried last week had those the 4 Kioras and the 3 mana 4/4 that puts a basic land into play tapped. And I found that the 3 mana 4/4 just isn't very good. It was too hard to get up to enough lands for it to matter. And the Kioras didn't have enough targets that drew a card from it. Once I got rid of those, I didn't have enough 4-power creatures. So I went to 4 Llanowar Visionary. And then I went to 4 Elesh Norn. And then instead of playing Mana Elf, we're playing 4 Portable Hole and Ossification on the low end with 2 mana ramp spells, the Prosperous Innkeeper and the Sylvan Caryatid. 4 Chariots, the card is awesome. The Chariot, Prosperous Innkeeper, Elesh Norn combo is just so good, right? You gain a shit ton of life. Creativity sometimes can't even kill you with 1 attack. That came up. Just they did 30 and I was at 4 after that. Okay, my turn. Attack you for 12 or, whatever. What I found is you were getting ahead, or excuse me, you're falling behind, and you're resolving Elesh Norn. If it didn't die, you were able to catch back up. Ossification is a 2-mana exile any 2 creatures. Skyclave Apparition, cleaning up the board. Those are, resolve a chariot with a Prosperous Innkeeper in play. You're just gaining a bunch of life to stabilize. That came up a bunch. So beat Lotus Field, beat Green-White Angels, lost a Heartbreaker to Mono-White Angels, lost to Green-White Pants. What do you want to call it? And then beat Mono-Red. Found out Elesh Norn turns off Ferocidon. I thought it would double the trigger, so I take twice. It actually just doesn't do any damage to me. It does stop life gain, which mattered, but so that was cool. So yeah, this shell actually kind of felt the best. There's a few things I'd trim. I'm playing a couple Thalia's Lancers with a few Legends to tutor and then Legends in the sideboard. I think I'd only play 1 Lancer. I think I would play a Tolsimir here. That card felt very good. I wouldn't play Yasharn. It stopped me from sacking treasures to Prosperous Innkeeper multiple times, which I didn't realize. So don't do that.
Noted. Yeah, Thalia's Lancers, 3 white, 4/4, first strike. When it enters, tutor any legendary permanent. So you have legendary lands here. You have the legendary enchantment, Oath of Nissa. You can get Elesh Norn. I mean, I can see why it's promising, but was it just like a little bit too expensive?
Yeah, and you just need stuff that like affects the board. Like it kind of gives you more of what Elesh Norn does. Like when you resolve it under Elesh Norn, it feels awesome. Like you just find an Oath and something else, and then Oath is like a 1 mana, like look at your top 6 and pick the best 2 cards. It's just crazy how good that is. But I often found that I wanted Thalia's Lancer for something that could remove something, and that's where either Sky Sovereign or Tolsimir is like you want a way to stabilize. We don't have any flying blockers. That's the only reason I lost to Mono White Angels. I was way ahead. I just needed to find like anything that could have interacted. I mean, we are playing 8 removal spells, but just like 1 more card that you could almost like to tutor up would have been so good. And then you just replace Yasharn with maybe, a cheap 2 mana card or maybe another Ossification or something.
Yeah, I don't think that Lancer is really tutors for any removal per se, except Boseiju, which you do have here.
Well, Tolsimir is like a removal spell. Sky Sovereign is like a removal spell.
Yeah, I suppose.
I mean, Tolsimir's, it's not amazing, but like if it kills a creature with a wolf and gains 3 life, like that's pretty reasonable stabilization. With Elesh Norn in play, it's insane. I mean, you just gain 6 life, probably kill 2 creatures. So.
Yeah, no, that's good evolution there. I think cutting the Topiary Stomper package makes a lot of sense. Glad to see that 1 Kiora snuck in.
Yeah, I don't know if it's right, but it, Kiora into Elesh Norn is insane. So speaking of that, this next list has 4 Kioras. This is the most speculative one. So this is a red-white Lotus Field list. The theory was that we would play Amiria's Call, and then we would sack Amiria's Call to Lotus Field, so it's in the graveyard. And then we would resolve Capricious Hellkite with Amiria's Call in the graveyard with the help of Kiora, let's say. Kiora would, untap our Lotus Field so we can get up to our 6 mana. We'd resolve Capricious Hellkite, draw a card from Kiora. We would cast Amiria's Call from graveyard. Amiria's Call resolves 2 angels, draw another 2 cards. Like, that was the dream. That was the hope. And if we were going to do that, it's like, why not play Elesh Norn, right? It doubles Capricious Hellkite trigger. It works amazing with Kiora. The problem was, so our list is Portable Hole, Knight of the White Orchid, which works amazing with Lotus Field, Bone Crusher Giant, nominally a 2 mana spell to interact with them, but Bone Crusher Giant triggers Kiora. We discovered that. That was something we championed right when it was released. 4 Blood Sun, of course. 4 Fable, just a generically powerful card. A couple cast outs. 3 Kiora, 4 Capricious Hellraiser. 4 Amiria's Call, and 2 Valakut Awakening, and then 22 lands, all of which make white. The problem was that Capricious Hellraiser was the worst card I've ever played in my entire life.
That's so disappointing to hear because I thought this was the coolest of all the Elesh Norn concepts. Like, man, wouldn't that be so sweet?
The list actually felt amazing. Like when you start Kiora-ing, like Kiora, play it for free because you untap Lotus Field, and then you like play Elesh Norn and just draw 2. And it's like, you're just in amazing shape. Like, do they kill Elesh Norn? Do they kill Kiora? The problem is Hellraiser had very few cards in the graveyard ever. Like, if we didn't actually sack Amelia's Call, we had to get all the way to 7 mana to cast it. Or unless we had like specifically a Fable in play. We don't have a way to ever get 9 cards in our graveyard except for when we played a mill deck, which was pretty wild. And even then, we just never happened to draw a Capricious Hellraiser.
But isn't that good, though, to have a small graveyard? Like, that way you are pretty sure you're going to get the Amelia's Call. Right? You know what you're going to get.
If you have Amelia's Call in your graveyard, you have to get it there.
I see.
So the only way we can get it there is to sack it to Lotus Field, cast it for 7. If we do that, we've won the game. Or discard it to Fable. Those are the only ways we can do it. And the play never came up where we sacked it to Lotus Field and ended up getting Capricious Hellraiser to resolve. People were bringing like graveyard hate against me. So like my terrible 6 mana card that was terrible was even worse after board.
Yeah, I guess it's like a lot easier to do in Modern because you'd highlighted a Modern build that used a similar shell with Amelia's Call, Capricious Hellraiser, but it also got to play Cleansing Wildfire, it got to play Flagstones, it got to play Boom Bust. So just like a lot more consistently gonna blow up your own land. Here, yeah, it's just the Lotus Field, and we don't have any way to tutor for the Lotus Field.
No, so the card that really impressed me was Cast Out, and then the Kiora Lotus Field combo with Elesh Norn. When those cards were happening, you cannot lose. The deck feels unstoppable. So if we just cut our 6 mana 4/4 that doesn't do anything with flying,
okay,
we might be on the cusp of doing something.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if it's a bug, but if you have 1 less land than your opponent and you resolve a Knight of the White Orchid with Elesh Norn in play, you get 2 lands.
Is that a bug?
I thought it was a intervening if or whatever. I never know how these rules interactions work. I just cast it one time to try. I was for sure going to win the game.
That does seem like a bug. That shouldn't happen, I believe.
Yeah, I didn't think it should.
Huh.
I want my money back. I was given an extra.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't ask for this land.
But I will say the Kiora plus Lotus Field plus just having Amelia's Call is just, you need the extra lands in your deck. We've talked about this a lot with Lotus Field. This is the MDFC that I have been waiting for. It is so good with Kiora, and it's very reasonable to cast. I cast it multiple times where you just, before like whatever, get a Valakut's Awakening and just cycle through your deck. It's like, this is way better. Just 7 mana, stabilize the board, draw 2 with Kiora. Just that alone, I don't know if the rest of the deck needs to stay, but like 4 Knight of the White Orchid, 4 Amelia's Call in your Lotus Field deck is something people should think about if you're going to play Kiora.
All of the Bant MDFCs in the Mythic cycle are pretty attractive like that. The blue one, Seagate Restoration, draws cards. The green one gives you a creature, and maybe it buffs it by 3. So
maybe gives you a creature.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you're willing to like change the base colors. Like right now, Kiora's a light splash into either blue or green from a base red-white deck. But if we don't need Capricious Hellraiser, are we still focused on red, or are we willing to like move into base white, blue, or white green?
I think you need red because Blood Sun. I do think you have to play Blood Sun in your Lotus Field deck. And Blood Sun even is better. Like, it's 3 mana draw a card is terrible, but 3 mana draw 2 cards if you have Elesh Norn in play is actually like pretty good. You're kind of excited to draw it in the late game. And actually, it mattered quite a bit. Like, white-blue couldn't animate their lands. Red-black has all these lands they want to animate. Like, it actually does stuff. It was good against mono whitelist. So, I'm not saying this list is broken. The other thing is, like, Fable's actually really good at smoothing out your draws in the mid to late game. And if copying, like, I copied the Hellraiser with a Kiora in play and no graveyard. That was cool. It was just 1 mana draw a card, attack them for 4.
Nice.
So I went 2-3. I beat blue-white control. I beat blue-black mill. I lost to black-green fight rigging because we only have 2 cast out, so I couldn't kill any of their big creatures. Lost to red-black mid-range and mono-black mid-range in like just super close games where I would just like draw the Hellraiser right after they cleared my graveyard. You know, the classic, like they just had the right card at the right time, and we just happened to draw the perfect card that would have won, you know, one turn late. So I think we just get rid of Capricious Hellraiser, just forget about it, just don't talk about it ever again. Then I think we're on to something, because the rest of the shell actually felt pretty good. So go up to 4 cast out. I looked up this card, Tyrant of Care Ridges.
Oh, God.
This is the card I've been wanting.
What?
This is the card we need.
What the heck is that?
6 mana, 4/5 flying. When it comes into play, do 4 damage to any target. Perfect.
What? Okay, so it's like a Flame Tongue Dragon, but for 6, and it hits players.
Or Planeswalkers.
And it has Fire Breathing.
And under Elesh Norn, it actually just stabilizes the board. That's what I want, is a 6 mana card that comes into play if I have Elesh Norn in play, and just, I won't die the next turn. It stops all the attacking creatures. It stops Planeswalkers from ultimating. It provides a fast clock against combo. This is what I want. This is the card I was looking for.
This is better than Sky Sovereign, you think? It's just like a more juice.
I think it's only better than Sky Sovereign because we don't have enough ways to crew Sky Sovereign.
I see. Well, okay. Tyrant of Care Ridges from the Brothers War, of course.
And 4 cast out. Cast out was insane. The exile removal with Elesh Norn in play is so good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could even play... Well, I guess you can't play Chain to the Rocks because you're not going to have...
Absolutely cannot play Chain to the Rocks. Red kept talking about ossification. I was like, we have 1 basic land in this deck. We cannot play ossification.
I mean, maybe you could play Chain to the Rocks. Like, you're playing the full boat of fast lands because they work so well under Lotus field conditions, but you don't have to. Like, you could just play Triomes and Shocks. Like, you're not really doing anything in the early turns anyway. Right?
Yeah, you could consider it. It's certainly something you could do.
All right, well, I mean, this is promising. This curve is still higher than I'm personally comfortable with, but I mean, these screenshots you have, just like going nuts with Elesh Norn.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the card that I'd want to cut, though, if I was going to lower the curve, is Fable, but it's so generically, like, powerful. But yeah, I agree with you, Dan. I want like, I was thinking, like, the 4th portable hole, and then, this is going to sound crazy, but I want to play the 2/1 that connives when it comes into play. It's just like a card that blocks and smooths our draws, and then in the late game with Elesh Norn, just like finds whatever piece we need, like it double connives.
Maybe you want the Scrapwork Mutt instead. I mean, it's not going to be a 3/2, but you get a lot of access to it throughout the game.
Yeah, it's, again, like, it sounds crazy as I'm saying it out loud, like I'm replacing Fable, which, you know, allegedly should be banned in Pioneer and Standard, with this significantly worse card, but we just need stuff to do on 2. Like, I hate rummaging versus looting, though, but you are correct, though. You do get a lot more, like, looks with the mutt.
It just bothers me that the Knight of the White Orchid is, like, not good on turn 2. I just wish that... I mean, I kind of want to play the 1/3, the Sturm Proctor. I know that shuts down everything else in the deck, but, like... It's a blocker. It's a honest-to-God blocker. That's just too much anti-synergy. All right. But staring at these lists for too long. But no, I think you made good progress on figuring out at least what doesn't work with the Hellraiser and be finding some replacements.
Yeah, so that's it. I thought Elesh Norn would be better. I don't think I actually played against an Enigmatic Incarnation list in 4 or 5 leagues. I did play against Angels, which Elesh Norn beats by itself, so that's cool.
Yeah,
but yeah, I didn't play enough against. I didn't play against enough decks where Elesh Norn was actually awesome. So it's not a good hate piece. Your deck actually has to exploit it, and it can't be all in on it because it doesn't actually win the game by itself. So that's the main lesson: is your deck needs to be very functional without Elesh Norn.
Yeah, that's good info because. I mean, coming from a week of playing a lot of Modern, Elesh Norn is just lights out in Modern, but maybe it's not quite as impactful in every matchup in Pioneer, and we should keep that in mind. All right, well, we'll leave it there. We've got plenty of Malcator lists to test. We'll be testing some this week, checking in on this throughout the month. This is our card of the month, so working in some ideas from the Faithless Brewing Discord. If you want to join us for that, come check out our Patreon. You can sign up as well. We'd love to have you. David, thank you very much. I'll see you next time.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Deck lists for this episode can be found at our homepage, faithlessbrewing.com. And don't forget to follow us in your podcast app to hear new episodes as soon as they drop. Support for this podcast is provided by brewers like you. Join the Faithless family and help support the show at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing for Discord access, bonus content, and more. That's all for today. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.